me to choose what to highlight. I had to choose from over 150 sites I've visited and photographed over the last 20 years. Regrettably, I felt forced to omit the towns of Buchanan and Fincastle. I hate to disappoint some people who are interested, but those are subjects unto themselves. I really thought it was better to just concentrate out in the county. Buchanan and Fincastle are actually pretty well documented, although I'd love to come back sometime and talk about those towns. I do have a lot of photographs and information, but for expediency's sake, I left the towns out. I also generally did not cover a lot of different resource types. I wanted to show you some diversity, but ultimately the path I chose was to not cover outbuildings, agricultural buildings, mills, commercial buildings, industrial sites, mining sites, iron furnaces, churches, schools, bridges, canals, and cemeteries. I have information on all of those things in Botetourt County and photographs. But once again, it was not expedient to try and include everything and just overwhelm you with too many types of resources. We're going to concentrate mostly on houses. So, since we are celebrating Botetourt's 250th anniversary, I thought it was important to begin with the oldest existing architecture. The Malcolm Allen House ruins date to the colonial era. Born in Kilburnie, Scotland in 1712, Allen married Mary Margaret Cunningham in 1740 in Prince Edward, Virginia. They were parents of at least 4 sons and 5 daughters. Malcolm registered for military service in 1757 during the French and Indian War, and later died in 1792 in Botetourt at the age of 80. Most of what I know about this site comes from this sign that's hung on a gate, you know, right outside the property there. I looked in our records, which go back to 1957, and we really didn't know anything more than what I just told you. So it's a little bit of an enigmatic site for me, but I did find this artist rendering online of what it used to look like. And that's the earliest known standing, if you will, structure that I know of in Botetourt County. I'm sure that other folks, you may know of something older, but I have to tell you, I'm also generally very skeptical of 18th century dates. There's not as many 18th century buildings still standing as a lot of people would like to believe. And one of the things I very often do is go out and debunk these dates. So I don't think that I believe that I'm always right, but the dates that I have up here are my estimates based on my own investigation. So let's move on. So the Brian McDonald Sr. and Jr. houses appear to be the oldest intact buildings of any kind in the county, to my knowledge. Although the construction date of McDonald Sr.'s house seen here has not been verified, it clearly is still among the oldest houses and easily one of the oldest surviving log buildings in southwestern Virginia. Chances are good, however, that McDonald Jr.'s colonial era house is the older of the two. I'm getting ready to show you that. But this house still stands. I've not had an opportunity to investigate it, the inside of it. A fellow named Paul Lee, who I've not met in person, called me a year or two ago and sent me some photos that he took. Paul Lee's not here tonight, is he? Okay. But you see, it hasn't changed too much over the years, and I think this stone chimney is very impressive, and also it does strike me as more of an 18th century chimney than a 19th century chimney. So the date I have up there, late 18th century, I'm thinking, you know, it could be like 1780s or 90s, really don't know. So the Brian McDonald Jr. house is kind of right across the road from, they're both set back off of the road. You can't really see them from the road, but they're neighbors at any rate. So I don't know if you can see some of these inscriptions down here, but this photo was taken in 1930 by a famous photographer, Francis Benjamin Johnston, and these photos are in the Library of Congress. And this is a recent photo. We put this house on the National Register of Historic Places probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And it's just a really interesting stone house, and you know, there's very few stone buildings left in the county or really anywhere around here. There are some, but not too many. So I think this date stone is what we're all looking at for the construction date of this building. You know, it looks pretty authentic to me. Somebody could have put it there, you know, 100 years ago. We can't say for sure, but I do see this stone in that 1930 photograph. And the inscription looks really authentic to me. So I'm inclined to accept this date, and all the other information that we have supports this date. I wanted to show you some interior shots of as many places as I could, because obviously anybody could drive around and look at buildings, but getting inside is really the challenge most of the time, and it's something that I tend to really have to work at. Either I get an invitation, someone just calls and invites me, or if it's something I'm interested in, I have to work at it to gain access. So I'm kind of trying to go a little bit chronologically here. And as far as the 18th century goes, that's what I have, you know, what I just showed you. But we do have quite a few buildings that date to around the turn of the century, circa 1800. This one, Gwen Eikenberry invited me to see maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. I took these photographs. And I actually saw this house in one of their Eikenberry Orchards commercials, and I thought, you know, I need to get in touch with her and go look at that. So I finally did, and it's just it's a well-preserved building, and I think it's one of the oldest log houses around. But again, look at that chimney. It kind of compares favorably with that Brian McDonald Sr. house chimney that we saw. The shape of it and the limestone construction of it. Let me just tell you a couple other things. Well, you see that it did get added onto, so the whole building does not date to all the same period. This end is an addition. That would be this part right here. And it's just one shot of the interior. When I was there, they had a lot of clutter in there. That's true of a lot of these buildings, and if my photos have a lot of clutter, then I kind of decided not to show them to you, a lot of them. But you see this building is just really well preserved inside and out, so I think it's just a great specimen. Also in this same area, in the Haymaker town, you all can see these dates and these. Essler House, Haymaker town vicinity. I've got the date here about circa 1810. That's based on my investigation. I've been into the house. You know, a lot of sources will tell you it's like 1780, 1790. You know, I'm not buying that, but I could be wrong. So it's still one of the oldest log houses anywhere in Southwest Virginia. As you go further down south, down the county, you're very unlikely to find an 18th century log house. They just haven't survived. Montgomery County would probably be your best chance. But as you go down the valley towards Abington and so forth, very unlikely you're going to find anything this old. Log buildings are difficult to maintain, and just about every one of these that you've seen has been structurally stabilized and had work done to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't still be here. So this is a shot of one of the chimneys, and just a couple things that I look at to help me date in some of the more significant attributes of this building are the Flemish bond chimney, which is, if you don't know about Flemish bond, it's this checkerboard pattern, of laying bricks. And in the really old brick masonry in this area, you're more likely to find these darkened header bricks. And what they are the ends of the bricks that were close to the fire when they were firing the bricks, or burning the bricks is what the term they used. And by about 1830 or so, they really stopped using these in any visible location on a building. In other words, they may be somewhere in the mass of the wall of the house, but they are not showing on the outside of the house because they grew to consider it an imperfection. But in the 18th century, it wasn't necessarily an imperfection. It was just the norm. And a lot of times they used them to enhance that checkerboard pattern of Flemish bond. So Flemish bond is a brick work style that just the way of laying the bricks that became popular around 1750 and decreased in popularity, almost completely out of style 100 years later in 1850. But even before then, it starts to wane. In the city of Roanoke and Roanoke County, Flemish bond is generally out of the picture by 1845 at the latest. Another thing is the way that these joints are struck. See that kind of it's like a convex V shape. That's what we call a double struck joint. And it's struck with a trowel along the top, and then it's struck again along the bottom. That style of pointing or joinery went out of popularity by about 1815 or so. After that, it became very standardized, and it's all the same. So these are dating clues that I use to help me reassess the dates that I read in old books and literature and so forth. Another thing is just this nicely laid limestone, which you'll see a lot of in Botetourt County, because the limestone, after all, is really what attracted a lot of the settlers here, because when they found limestone, they knew they were in fertile soils. So all down the valley, all the way into Tazewell County, Russell County, you see a lot of limestone and a lot of agriculture back during the 19th century. So I'm sorry, instead of telling you a whole lot about one place, I thought it'd be better to kind of show you a lot of different places, and I'm trying to disperse them all across the county, from the furthest, all corners of the county, so that I'm not just concentrating on one area like Haymaker Town, which there happens to be a lot of neat houses out in that direction. So this one's over on the other side, over towards Indian Rock vicinity. This is one of the most recent houses in the county that we listed on National Register. It has a lot of different names attached to it over the years. As you see, we have a photo going back to 1973 when it was called the Pearl Alphin House. In our research, we couldn't find a whole lot about her, and it appears that she only occupied the house during the 20th century, and that her family did not own it going way back. The oldest family that we could connect to this house was a Reynolds from, say, the 1830s and 40s. But the house almost definitely is older than that. Stone houses in the county really went out of style by the 1820s. And we only have record of 7 stone houses in the whole county. There probably were others, but like I said, our records go back to 1957, and there's only 7. I have a few more shots of this, the other side of the house. It's generally well preserved, but one of the problems is there's a quarry across the road. I have a map of that I'll show you in just a minute. I want to make sure that you got a couple pictures of the interior. That's basically all it is a shell of a house. It's been used as a hunting camp and things like that. It's not really been very well maintained, especially on the inside. There's still a lot of old material in there, like these joists, and I was up in the attic, and everything up there is original. This door is probably a late 19th century door, but what I like about this photo is it shows how thick the walls are. They're literally 2 feet thick. That's a lot of stonework. So here's a shot of its location, and this is the quarry. I think this is a limestone quarry. I believe that it is. And this quarry owns the vein of limestone that goes all the way down through here. They own the mineral rights, but they don't own the surface rights. And when they blast at the quarry, it damages the house. I was there at the house one day, and a guy came over from the quarry, and he said, "You all need to leave here, come with me," and they drove us about a mile up the road so that they could set off their charges. That little by little is taking its toll on the house, and it's cracking and falling apart. I don't really know what the present owner is doing to combat that situation. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to here was this commercial lime making site that is part of the whole property. And just to reinforce the fact that Botetourt was heavy into lime manufacture back in the 19th century. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So, come back to some of the earliest houses. This place is called Rustic Lodge, and just so happens I looked it up today online, and I found that it's for sale. And all the realty sites say it was built in 1779, which I think is about 30 years too early. That's something that I call the 30-year rule. You take the year that the owner or the old history book or the realtor gives you and add 30 years, maybe 40, and you're probably hitting it about right. And you'd be surprised how often that works. It works out great. Anyway, this is just a wonderful house. It's not on the National Register, but we did evaluate it and found it eligible. One of the neat things about this house is that it's what they call a dog trot house. And what that means is it's two separate log pens that are joined together with an open breezeway in the middle. So over here is one two-story log pen, and over here is another log pen. And then this may have been just an open breezeway at one time before they put the front, installed a front and rear wall. So in this case, we could easily tell that both of these pens were built at the same time because they both rest on the same log sill. It's one continuous log sill, or two continuous log sills, one in the front, one in the back. They go all the way across the whole building. So we know that they were built at the same time. But dog trot houses are a really good way to enlarge the size of the house by building a separate log structure and then covering them both under one roof. So it also has a nice old chimney. It doesn't look like an 18th century chimney. 18th century chimneys tended to have flat weatherings on the shoulders. Right about 1800, they went over to this step, this build-up step look. You know, little steps up here. Right about 1800, so that's another good dating clue that I'm using here. On the Realtor website today, I found these two pictures. And what this is that dog trot. This is the dog trot between the two log pens. And of course, they photoshopped the heck out of them to make them all colorful. But you can see just right here that these logs all had plaster. These are the ghost marks of lath on which plaster was applied. So this, for a long time, was treated like a finished room. It was a finished room. But when houses get restored, people very often want to expose the logs, and I guess that's okay, but it's not how it looked originally, or at least not historically. This house is long gone, but I've gotten some good mileage out of this slide over the years because it's a perfect illustration of what a saddlebag house is. It's almost the total opposite of a dog trot house. So the dog trot house had chimneys on both ends and then an open breezeway in the middle. This has the chimney in the middle and then two log pens on both sides. Now this one's just been taken down and dismantled and moved to a farm somewhere. But you see that this chimney did have a large fireplace. It was later infilled, but it was a large fireplace. So that chimney was used. by both log panels. That's the saddlebag configuration as opposed to a dog trot, and it's another good way to expand the size of a log house without having to notch new logs into the existing house, which is a difficult thing to do. It's much easier just to build a whole new structure, connect them all under one roof. This whole place is gone now, and like I said, both pens were taken down and moved to somebody's farm, and I don't know if they ever put them back up. That was an interesting house, and the date you see there is a good date, I'm sure of that. Okay, so Lauderdale, in general, I didn't want to talk about these big manor houses, the best known houses in the county, but this one is interesting and it's illustrative. And I have good pictures, so we can look at those and see the kind of woodwork that you're going to find in most of your other large houses of the period. This was built around 1921, but it was heavily remodeled around 1940. So a lot of the features you see actually date from the 1840, not 1940, from that period. And those features from the 1840 period include all of this symmetrical molding around the doors and these turned corner blocks. These kinds of moldings were first popularized in the United States about 1815, but they really didn't make it to the more remote parts of the country, and it took a little bit longer. So about 1830 is when you really start to see this kind of thing around this area. So all these moldings are completely symmetrical, and all these, this is a whole wealth of turned corner blocks here. The side lights and lighted transom with a grid pattern, a grid tracery they call that, and a 6-panel door, the box lock there. Those are all things that you're going to see in practically every house from the period, every house of the more well-to-do of the period. And some of the things you see inside the house are these scroll-sawn tread ends there on a stringer. Basically, it's stringer ornament would be probably a better way to say it. Another odd thing is these very, very slender colonette newel posts. Somebody recently described them as undersized, and architectural historian on our review board quickly corrected them and said, you know, that's not undersized, that's how they looked back then. And that's true. In almost every one of these buildings, you see these really slender colonnettes. And then later on in the Victorian era, some of them are more than a foot square and 6 feet high. They just went absolutely crazy. And maybe around 1850, elephantitis set in. And you start getting these gigantic, robust, turned, vase-shaped newel posts made out of a single piece of wood. Some of them are that big. But from the federal style, which is what we're looking at here, the federal style, also known as Adamesque, is delicate. It's a much more delicate style. Everything is supposed to be delicate. The Greek Revival, which replaced it, is much more robust. And so that's what we're seeing here. All of this is federal style, but this house is a combination of federal style and Greek Revival. The other thing is these square balusters. It seems odd that they would have such simple balusters. Some people call them pickets, but they're just these rails that support the handrail. Why are they square? Why are they so plain? I don't know, but they work. They just work. I mean, and they're like that in virtually every house. You really don't see turned balusters much at all. Very occasionally, but not much at all, and maybe later in the Victorian time. This is unusual because there's actually 3 of them per step. And they're all mortised right into the steps. They're not nailed, they're glued, they're fastened, they're mortised right into the tread. But it's unusual to see 3 per tread like that. And Lauderdale has some beautiful woodwork. This is really a pretty standard mantle for the period. It's a pure Greek federal style mantle, locally crafted, I'm certain. And the thing that really, the main identifying characteristic of federal style mantles are pilasters or colonnettes over on the side supporting this entablature here. And then this part is called the frieze, and this is a center tablet. And in that center tablet here is a sunburst motif. And so these are all motifs that you see in Botetourt County, in Rockridge County, a lot of your valley counties during the federal period. So the federal style really lasted from about 1790 to, in Botetourt, they hung on to it longer than a lot of places. Till about 1840, you're still seeing the heavy influence of federal style. And almost full-blown federal style houses in like 1837. One I'm thinking of in particular is Prospect Hill in Fincastle. Full-blown federal style in 1837 when the Greek revival is already coming into neighboring counties like Bedford and Rockridge by that time. So two more mantles from Lauterdale, and then we're going to move on. But you see the center tablet, you see all the identifying characteristics that I just mentioned. You also see a lot of fluting in this case, and reading in this case. Fluting and reading. And then this very common punctate design in a frieze. I know this is kind of a blurry photo, but this is a spiral molding here that looks like a telephone cord. All those are really common motifs from the federal style here locally. And this is all considered vernacular architecture. This is not considered high style architecture. It's not architect. There's no architect involved. These are designed from pattern books. And in some cases, the people who carved mantles, they got idiosyncratic and kind of came up with their own designs, which are actually usually easy to follow because they are different from everything else that you see. Hawthorne Hall, a couple people have mentioned to me recently, but I always thought of it as being kind of off the beaten path. Like, I mean, it's right off of 220, but you don't see it from the road. And I actually just stumbled upon it one day, maybe 15 years ago, and I stopped in and impromptu visit and caught the lady there off guard, but she was nice enough to let me in and get some photographs. It's a fantastic house, and the fact that it has wood shingles on it, or shakes in this case, shakes and shingles are different. That's just so neat to see. So it really does look original. All of these houses had wooden shingles or shakes. No metal roofs until after the Civil War, well after the Civil War. Everything was covered with wood. Even the fanciest, biggest houses, the courthouse, the highest status buildings in Botetourt all had wood shingles or shakes. Shakes are cruder and square shaped. Shingles are actually shaped, usually rounded on the end with a draw knife. Shingles are a higher status thing than shakes. A couple other things here I wanted to point out. The Flemish bond, of course. You got to have that on any nice brick house of the period or brick building. This is a molded brick cornice. I'm going to show you some better shots of that. We're going to see that a lot. Very, very common in the valley, and also over in Franklin County, Bedford County, but say Rockridge, Augusta, and Rockingham. Those are the epicenter of the molded brick cornice in America. It has the highest concentration of these found anywhere in America, and the settlers that continued down into Tennessee took it with them down into Tennessee, so you could actually see these in Nashville, but they originated here in the Central Valley of Virginia. Another thing, this wonderful fan light up here. This is a hallmark, another hallmark of the Adamesque or federal style. And a 5-bay front. This is also pretty important. 5 bays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By about 1835, 40, You don't see those anymore around here. There's no more 5 bay fronts. I don't know why, but they just go away. And now it's just 3 bays. You look at all the houses that the Dyerleys built in my book around here, they're all 3 bays, all of them. Because they were during that time period, 5 bay front just went away. It kind of went away with the federal style. Once the Greek revival came in around 1840, it just goes to a 3 bay front. So that's another good dating tool. You know, not that there's not occasional exceptions, but it's a really good, strong rule of thumb. This is the side of the house. Gives you an idea of how deep it actually is. This is what we call a double pile house. Single pile just has 1 room deep. Double pile has 2 rooms deep. So this is a double pile house where each room had its own chimney. Even the upstairs had its own fireplace. Each room had its own fireplace, and then there's 4 chimneys. So that makes it a nice house. That makes it a house of affluent. The other thing is just a Flemish bond on the side elevation. Most of the times, masons went for a cheaper and easier bond to lay on the side elevations because, you know, it didn't get seen as often. And that's one thing I've talked about a lot in the Darby study. So Hawthorne Hall, you can see these mantles, a little bit better photos here. Same things that we were just talking about, but a few variations on same things. The sunburst in the middle, the same kind of moldings here. In this case, paired and fluted colonnettes. That's a really nice feature. I didn't want to evade the lady's privacy by showing all of her personal furnishings, so I tended to concentrate on those pieces of woodwork that I wanted to talk about rather than show you whole rooms, because I just remember flashing back to how I felt kind of uneasy about that impromptu visit, which is something that I really never do. But when I came upon that house, I was so impressed, and I didn't know about it. And I was like, I'm going to have to knock on this door. I don't know when I'm going to come back, but I really don't like to do that. Okay, and then while we're on the subject of federal style mantles, this may be the nicest one that I've come across in Botetourt. Captain John Pitcher House in Glen Wilton. Look at all these wonderful motifs here. You've got, you know, lots of fine reading. You have the, I'm sorry, wrong button. You have the spiral molding, and then just this really fine carving and punctate motifs up here. This is what really does it for me. I love this. It just looks so handcrafted and so original, and it's actually really in good shape. You're just missing a couple reeds here. I just think that's beautiful. So Wheatland Manor, of course everybody knows Wheatland Manor, right? Well, I couldn't leave this out because the owner, Mr. Jones, calls me on a fairly regular basis, and he's been doing that for about 20 years. And now he is in, how should I put it, he's in bad health. And he hasn't even been to this house in a long time. And it's an outstanding house, and there's so many outstanding things about it. I believe that he would sell it to almost anyone for almost nothing if he had some assurance that they would care for it, put the kind of love and care into it that he did. And he did, but he never got it where it needed to be. It hasn't been occupied in decades. He never quite got it to the point where it was inhabitable. There's no existing kitchen or bathrooms. It would still need a large investment, but he's virtually sure that once he's gone, it's going to be auctioned, and realtors are going to come in and knock it down and put up McMansions. So I had to mention it tonight just to put that out there. If you know somebody who could take this on, I'll put them in touch with Mr. Jones and see if we can't get it taken care of. It's another federal style house from the 1820s, but the porch is Greek revival. I have a little bit of information for you to read. I had information on these other houses that I didn't read. But this was built by the brothers Joel Jesse and Silas Rowland, who jointly owned the property in 1820. Deputy Sheriff Rufus Pitzer purchased the house along with a grist mill and a sawmill from Silas Rowland's son in 1851. Pitzer dressed up the facade by adding the two-tier Greek Revival porch. It was also during Pitzer's ownership that the half-mile-long limestone retaining wall along the road was constructed. After the Civil War, Wheatland Manor became home to Jacob Cronus, the county's leading cattle farmer. So there was a lot of land with it. The land that Mr. Jones owns is under a conservation easement. That's good, but it doesn't protect the house. And just a shot from the back. It's a really neat house. All of these additions, well, this one might be original, but these additions, of course, are later, but I think they're great. I love the way they were done on there. This, I'm sure, was added later, also maybe in the 1850s, 60s, 70s. Another house with the molded brick cornice that I mentioned. That's probably enough said about that slide. And I just want to give you a quick look at the interior, even though it's kind of messed up in there. As I mentioned, there's still a whole lot of work to do. But while I'm here, I'll point out this very spindly colonnette newel post. Look how delicate that is. I mean, you can barely see it. The thickness of these walls, all solid brick walls, holding that all together. I guarantee that it's a strong structure. All the walls are at least 13 inches thick, pure solid brick. The outside walls and these interior load-bearing walls. Chair rails, you'll see in every one of these houses up to about the 1840s. Originally they were called chair boards, but if you call them chair boards today, nobody knows what you're talking about. But all these houses until the 1840s have them in every room. Then suddenly they just go away. No more chair rails throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So this is what we call center passage plan. The center passage is just unheated, contains the stair, and it's flanked by rooms on both sides, upstairs and down. Same plan, upstairs and down. Very simple. Center passage plan. So I've shown you brick, I've shown you log, and I've shown you stone. The other major construction method is timber framing. What I learned through putting this talk together is just how rare timber framing is in Botetourt County. There are some timber frame buildings in Fincastle, but very, very few. And timber framing goes back to old world days, to pre-colonial days. And it didn't change, never really changed. But you just really don't find it in Fincastle. However, this one, all the way out in Blue Ridge. This house was listed on the Roanoke Valley Preservation Foundation's list of endangered sites, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And as far as I know, it's still badly endangered. Probably looks just the same way as it does now. I'll show you a little bit of details about what timber framing looks like. And again, this house is pretty sorry inside, but I wanted you to at least have a glimpse of what it looks like inside. These are transitional Federal to Greek Revival mantles. Another thing I've noticed a lot of in this talk are these stacked panel doors, which are rare elsewhere for this period, but I see them in a lot of these Botetourt houses. Kind of a similar plan from the back as Wheatland. But here's some details I wanted to talk about. These are timber framing details. So a house today, or even built in 1890, was not a timber frame house, it was a frame house. It would have been a wood house with weatherboards, or this frame is light frame. Timber frame means a big, heavy, stocky frame. And almost always with these diagonal braces. Each floor gets its own set of diagonal braces, a down brace. Sometimes you'll even see an up brace, but that's not as common. Another interesting thing about this house is, notice these bricks crammed in between all the studs. between every stud, even between the bracing. That's called brick knocking. And that's something that you saw a lot in the 18th century and into the 19th century, but you hardly ever see around here. I could count on one hand the times I've come across it. In eastern Virginia, it's more common, probably northern Virginia more common. These are all handmade bricks, just like the chimney. And the reason for it, nobody's 100% sure why they did it, but the best explanation is that it shuts off the chimney effect in the event of a fire. If there's a fire on the first floor, all of these vertical areas between the studs become chimneys and just vent the fire right up to the second floor. And it just really exacerbates the fire. So they felt that if they could close that off, no more chimney effect, that it makes the house more fireproof. Another explanation is that it kept the vermin, the rats and the mice out of the walls. I'm not sure. That's probably both true. And then lastly, it increases the thermal mass of the house and makes it less susceptible to, you know, quickly warming in the morning and quickly cooling down at night. So any of those things, and probably all of them are true. But I think probably the chimney effect is the main thing. Except for the nogging, probably that's all I wanted to mention there. But here's another close-up shot of the framing. And these are all characteristic of timber framing as opposed to other kinds of framing that came later. One of the things that you always see, instead of using nails, the studs and the braces are all mortised into this hewn log, which is called the sill. So no mechanical fasteners like nails or screws being used, no metal hangers or anything like that. It's all done by cutting a hole and then cutting a tendon on the other piece and fitting them together tightly. This required a lot of skill. So generally speaking, timber frame houses are built by more skilled labor than log houses or other types of frame. Usually they're built by skilled housewrights who work through the apprentice system and know exactly what they're doing. And another thing here is the Roman numerals that they use, they call these marriage marks. And these are on every single timber frame building that you ever see. Here's 1, 2, and 3, and then down here is the 3 that matches up. And then, so that's inserted, the tendon's inserted, and the peg is inserted. Let's see, what else? It's a pretty instructive picture overall. You see the adze marks here. This is probably actually broad axe marks, and then the shorter ones are adze marks. And that was all hewn, no sawing. These members are sawn, probably in a water power saw, mill saw. Okay, so we've covered the 4 types of materials and constructions that you're going to find between the 18th and 19th centuries, all the way up to the late Victorian period in Botetourt County, and of course neighboring counties as well. And that's the only really timber frame, good example of timber framing that I have to show you. Or there may be some others in my collection, but I didn't find them. So, moving along here, let's see, check the time. Never started my timer. I'm sorry. I'm not going to keep you here all night. We're getting through it. So, the Raiders. I don't know if you all know about the Raiders. Mostly Samuel Raider is the most famous one. Of course, there's still lots of Raiders living, and probably some of you are related to them, or maybe you are Raiders. I don't know. Jack Raider I know pretty well, and of course John, president of the Historical Society for many years. Jack's been wanting me to do a book on the Raider family for a long time. I just didn't have the energy after the Darleys. They just plumb wore me out. But this is my homage to the Raiders and to Jack. This is the furthest I've gone to document their contributions to Botetourt architecture, is what I'm telling you tonight. So this is George Washington Raider. He was born in 1797. He was mostly a farmer. His father was Adam Raider, who came over from Germany. And let's see, let me get my facts right. Adam Raider came over from Germany. He was orphaned while he emigrated. I guess his parents died en route in 1769, when he was 8 years old. He ended up in Shenandoah Valley as an indentured servant. Family lore says he ran away. And, well, he had established himself as a saddle and harness maker. He served in the Revolutionary War in 1789. He married Mary Hotzenthaler, keeping all the German blood in the family there. In 1801, Adam and Mary moved their family, consisting of 6 children at the time, including George Washington Raider, to Botetourt County. George became a prominent farmer and one of the first trustees of Roanoke College before they moved to Salem. Well, his younger brother, Samuel, born in 1801, entered the construction trades primarily as a brick mason. 2 short articles about Samuel Raider were published in the Historical Society Journal in the summer and winter of 1968. I'm sure that George remembers editing those articles 53 years ago. One of them was just a very short blurb. The other one was an actual article of 2 or 3 pages that has some good information about Samuel Raider and a picture of him. I have a picture of him, but one of the things the article said was that he was big and strong and he had really large hands. You can see him in the picture, and that was why he went into brick masonry. I don't know. Maybe so. Anyways, this is a beautiful house. We've listed it on the National Register maybe about 10 years ago or less. And we'll get into this a little bit more. So this was also really a dog trot house with an open breezeway in the middle, right through here. But over on this side is a log house built. It was standing by 1820. We don't know the exact date, but I think that's pretty close. And then right around 1830, his brother Samuel built this Flemish bond section onto it. And the breezeway at that time. So in 1830, the size of the house, was enlarged by 3/5. Does have the molded brick cornice here. It does have the Flemish bond. All these windows appear to be original. Chimneys, everything. It has good, what the term we use is integrity. It has a really good level of integrity. Of course, the porch would have been probably late Victorian, like 1870s or 80s. Inside the house, this really vibrant faux graining. I'm not sure when the graining was done, how exactly old it is, but it's very stylized. It's not that really realistic faux graining that you often see. But faux graining was a major phenomenon. Like all the finer houses and even some of the more modest farmhouses out in, say, Craig County had this really beautiful faux graining on the doors, the windows, the trim, all the wood, the mantles. It's all done with 2 colors, using feathers and weird kind of brushes like that. And sometimes it looks very realistic, like a certain grain of wood, and sometimes it's more stylish, like this. But it's really well preserved in this house. And so this is kind of more graining, and this is more marbling, faux marbling. Really does look like marble, but of course it's not. The marbling is also on this mantle that you see here, largely Greek revival mantle in the brick section, and then this is the fireplace over in the log part of the house. So, what else do I want to tell you about that? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Samuel Raider now. So this was Samuel Raider's house. He moved into it in 1849 on the left. And Darby, he was from a family of 11. And he had a lot of brothers. 2 of them are in the 1850 census as being brick masons. They're younger than Samuel. Samuel was turned 49 that year. These 2 other brothers were 35 and 40. So They were too old to go to the Civil War, so I know they weren't his sons, because he lost 2 sons in the war. I think 2 out of 4 of his sons died in the war, and a son-in-law. But after I show you a few of these houses, you're going to be able to identify a Raider house. And they're all over the place. I mean, I've probably counted about 15 of them, you know, and I'm not going to show you all of them. But there's a lot of similarities. They're usually very modest in size. Notice a 3-bay front. I think there are a couple older ones I'll show you that have 5 bays. These little square windows flanking the chimney. You see that in almost every one of these. Flemish bond on the front and molded brick cornice. The chimneys are almost always on the end, either completely exterior or semi-exterior like these are. So those are some of your major hallmarks of Raider construction, not necessarily all Samuel Raider. Of course, very different from what the Dyerleys were building here around Roanoke. This is the front of the Darby Raider house with some of these features that you'll see. A pretty good close-up shot of the molded cornice. This one's called an ovalo, and this one's a cavetto. Can't really tell, but that is concave, and this one's called convex. This is what they call a corbelled course. Usually all the molded brick cornices start with 1 or 2 or 3 courses that are corbelled, which just means it juts out a little bit more than the wall below it. And sometimes they jut out and out and out. Really what all this really is a decorative way to carry the eaves, to support the eaves. Another thing you see here is what they call a jack arch. It's not the most beautifully executed jack arch, but it's a structural arch. You can see that they put this piece in at the very end, and that's what keeps everything there. So if you pull this window out, that arch is going to stay there, just because they're all wedged in like that. And that is what carries the load, the weight of the wall around the window, is that arch. And these arches, out of style by really even before this house was built. They're pretty much going out of style. But in the 1820s, you'll see a lot of them, and before. 1820s and before. Another neat thing here, notice how heavy this window is. Everything's pegged. So really, this window is strong enough to carry that load for a while. But the 2 of these things together are what carry the load around the window. Lastly, I'll point out this white penciling on the joints. And what that is white linseed oil, powdered white lead in a solution of linseed oil. And when they painted that on the joints, that allowed you to, as you saw the house from a distance, say out by the road 100 feet away, it looks like all the joints in the masonry are 100% straight and perfect. It's like an optical illusion. Because when they painted that white on there, they used a straight edge. And so usually the line is perfectly straight. And you can see it, and that's how it looks from a distance, and it looks like just perfect brick masonry from a distance. But as you see closer, these joints are actually quite large, and the reason they're large is because the bricks were not uniform. Handmade bricks are never uniform, so you can't have uniform joints. You have to have thick joints to make up for that lack of uniformity, and that's why they penciled all of them. Every brick house around here from 1800 to probably 1880, 90, around in there, every single one of them had this treatment. You may not see it because it may be weathered away, but if you look under the porch and under eaves, you'll see it. And also because it was white lead and linseed oil, it probably did have a protective effect on the mortar, which the mortar is nothing more than lime and sand, so it's not hard. And a little bit of water can easily wash it out of there. So it may have protected that also. Okay, just a few more Raider house. Flip through these pretty closely. I know this is a Raider house because when the Hayes who used to live there pulled a mantle off, he had signed his name behind the mantle, Samuel Raider. Of course, they didn't take a picture of it, but they told me, and I believe them. This house is kind of right across 220. these two houses. If this is a Raider house, it's reputed to be, and I believe it is. It's one of the nicer ones, and notice it's 5A because it's still in the 1820s. This also 5A in 1820s, although asymmetrical. And this is a modest door from that period, from 18 teens and 20s. You see a little 4-light transom light, and this is a fancy door from that period. But they all really fit the style. They all fit the style. This one's more expensive than the other. What I like about this one is they very cleverly found a screen door that mimics the same, matches the 4-panel configuration, 6-panel configuration of the actual door. I like that screen door. So these are over closer to Buchanan, and I don't know if I know for sure about these being Raider houses, but in my mind they are. I'm almost certain that they are. Just looking at the construction, all the hallmark things that I mentioned. Even look at this, I know it's a little blurry, but look at this jacquard here. It looks so similar to that one on the Darby Raider house, and not perfectly executed, but it's doing its job. Okay, now this one was hard to photograph, but you can see exactly what I mean from that picture. It's hard because of all that vegetation. Now this one, it's called the Hogshead Coral House, and it has what they call a toothed cornice. Some people say houndstooth, some say mouth tooth, some say tiger tooth. Let's just call it a toothed cornice. It's two courses of pointed bricks at an angle pointing out. This is the only house I know that Samuel Raider built that had these, but we know he built it because that second article I mentioned in the Historical Society Journal from 1968 includes the contract verbatim between Samuel Raider and Mr. Hogshead. And it's pretty funny. Now here's Samuel Raider. Doesn't show his big hands, but you see what he looked like. And the funny thing about this is he built this whole house on the left here for $105 and a mule in 1847. And he says it right here. This is just 50,000 brick. Think of all the work. First you got to dig the clay, then you got to mold them, then you got to dry them, then you got to fire them, then you got to sort them, then you got to build them. All that for $105 and a mule. And it even tells you the dimensions of the house. All the contracts always say it'll be done in a good workman-like order. They all say that. Said Hogshead agrees to pay him $105. Raiders to put up and help burn a lime kiln. Oh my gosh, it's not like the lime kiln's already there ready to use. He has to build one in order to make the mortar and do the work. Said Raider is to take one horse critter at $60, and said Raider is commencing the brick by August 1847. But we know exactly who built it, when, and why. And I think the horse critter is what made that good fodder for Georgia's Journal. So, a couple more and then we're done with the Raiders for now. This is a Roland Raider house. I think it was bought by Stephen Lemon, owns that now. And it was built in 1860, reportedly interrupted during the Civil War and then finished right after the war. Had to be done by Samuel Raider and his gang. They're a Raider family, and it's just right there where they all live. This one does have the corbelled cornice instead of a molding cornice. It's a little bit simpler. Then the DeFranco house. I think the DeFrancos still live there. Claudia DeFranco, the artist, a wonderful artist. And then Mr. Professor, I think he's a professor at Hollins. But this one just escapes notice. It's right on 220, but because it's painted. And the molded brick cornice is painted so dark that you have to go up closely to see it. So these are just some of the ones that I've been able to identify by more or less just driving around the county. So I didn't talk about churches, so this is my diversity slide. This is where I read you the diversity of resources. And I really probably not going to say much about them, except that there's a lot of great churches in Botetourt. The apex architecture of most community are the churches. The churches are where people put their money. They gave freely. They gave large amounts of their income to their churches, and so they were able to build these beautiful structures. This is the African American church in Springwood. I don't know, I fear for its condition. I haven't seen it in a while. So I'll move on. I want to do a little bit of industrial stuff. I've been talking about Eagle Rock for a long time. I would just love, there's so much potential there to do something. And I've been trying to talk to people about maybe doing a historic district there. It's the one, you know, Buchanan has a historic district, Castle has one. Eagle Rock that has one, but it's never been listed or even evaluated. And I'd really like to see that happen. But the Moore Company lime kilns are really what a lot of it is about. I have a little bit of info. They were built in two phases. The first kiln was constructed in 1847. The operator, Sheets and Company, was sold to the Moore Lime Company of Richmond in 1884. They added two additional kilns by 1887. In the 1890s, two additional kilns, no longer extant, were constructed on a second site located at the east end of town. Several extant houses and a commissary were constructed by the Moore Lime Company to house employees and attract additional workers. Excuse me. Limestone was quarried in and around Eagle Rock and delivered to the site for processing. One such quarry was located just across the river. Towers were built on each side of the river and attached via a cable system to transport the raw material to the lime company site for processing. Eagle Rock Lime Company, another lime producer that had 4 lime kilns at its peak, was also located across the river. So the whole thing is that lime is made from burned limestone. Botetourt's rich in limestone, hence they had a very rich lime manufacturing industry for years, all throughout the 19th century in Botetourt County. So lime's a very important part of the story. What was lime used for besides mortar? We talked about mortar. It's in plaster. Before they came out with gypsum plaster, all plaster is made of lime, lime and sand, just like the mortar. Agricultural lime was important to put on the fields, and it also had household uses, like in the privy. So lime was an important part of life in those days. Enough said about that. So here's just a shot of the Moore Company lime kilns. You see the kilns there in the background. And just this map to show you where the kilns are. Of course, you all know, you've been to Eagle Rock. You just go across the new bridge. The old bridge is down here, right there. Just go across the new bridge. And then you're going down like you're going to Railroad Street. This is Railroad Street, where? Right here. And the kilns are right there. It's like a little park. And they're just so neat. They're really neat structures. And you kind of need to know a little bit about the story to even know what the heck was going on there, right? So, but I'd love to see that park develop further. This could all be a nice historic district. Look how close it is to the water. It has so much potential for tourism and so forth. So this is one of the houses that probably, it's right there on Railroad Avenue. The kilns are right here to the left. The Ben Owen House has some beautiful features on it. Really does. From the stone foundation to this nice kind of folk, it's kind of an Italianate motif. Just like these brackets and this dental cornice here. It's a pretty cool house. It could obviously use it's well cared for, I'm sure, but it could use a little restoration work just to take it back to how it originally looked. Then Railroad Avenue, this is Railroad Avenue. I mean, it looks so sleepy down there now, but it's so neat. It's just so neat. And the depot, still there. How many other depots are even still in Botetourt County? I mean, I'm not sure. There's not many. Most of them are gone. And it's not just Botetourt. The depots, they're still disappearing. I could name several that have been torn down by the railroads just in the last few years. Not just in Botetourt, but other. And I cover 32 counties, so I kind of keep my eye on what's going on and all around. So anyway, go down there, check it out, talk to some people, and see if we can get a fire lit under some of these people. I understand they don't want change. I can't fault them for that. People that live there may not want to see any change, and that may be why I've not gotten anywhere with this. The farm supply store. Look at the beautiful one. Yeah, condition's bad, but the integrity is something totally different than condition. Integrity means it hasn't been changed. It may not have been kept up, but it hasn't been changed. Look at the storefront. All the original windows, doors, everything, it's all still there. That's pretty rare to see. Usually the first floor storefront is just completely done away with years ago and just completely redesigned. That's a great building. The depot, of course, I think it's built about 1891 because that's when the railroad came into Eagle Rock. And it had a little spur that went across the river down to Newcastle, and it also continued on to Clifton Forge. And this was all Chesapeake and Ohio. What a fantastic little depot. I love the checkerboard Flemish bond pattern with the darkened headers there, and the integrity's great. And I don't know, this picture looks a little like it got stretched out, but what a gem this building is. I mean, no addition, well, a little addition in the back, but the massing all intact. These wonderful segmental arched windows here. I love this building. It's fantastic. And it's like it's the only building that's really occupied, I think, on Whole Street. And they're doing business out there.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the only ones that called and told me they're okay with the historic district and get anyone else on. Anyway, little plug there for Eagle Rock. And that's all I hope that was enough and not too much. Yeah, I went a little long, I'm sorry. Didn't need to. My alarm would have gone off. Are there any questions or comments, anything? Yes?
You were describing the Essler House, and it was at times advertised as being from the 1780s or 90s. You said, I don't buy that, it's 1810s. What is it you don't buy? What are the clues?
Well,
you described the brick.
Yeah. Well, I have
and the tuck pointing. Were there other clues that would...
Sometimes it's not clues, sometimes it's a feeling. And but I tell you, there's a lot of clues that you're looking for when you go in a building like that. One of them are wrought nails, hand wrought nails, or rose head nails. Rose head nails are done by about 1810. By 1808, the cut nail is essentially perfected in manufacturing. And so by 1815, Thomas Jefferson sent one of his slaves into Lynchburg from Poplar Forest to buy some wrought nails. Thomas Jefferson preferred wrought nails because they were easy to quench. They didn't break. Cut nails would break. And and they don't split wood the way cut, So anyway, the slave came back empty-handed. All he could find were these new cut nails. They're everywhere, and they're plentiful, and they're cheap. So if I don't find a preponderance of wrought nails in a building, I'm automatically looking at 1815, and that's a little bit late. Archaeologists probably use 1810, but it didn't happen that quick. One technology didn't replace the other, especially we were out in the boonies then. Some say we still are. So that's one clue. Another clue is the sawing, saw marks. The brick joinery, like I mentioned. And I've been looking at bricks for so long, I really have a pretty good feel of what an 18th century brick looks like compared to 19th century brick. All these clues taken together. The joinery of the logs, you have different kinds of notches that were prevalent. That's a V-notch log house. Maybe you look at pictures of maybe the oldest log house that ever it was photographed in this area was the Garce Log Fort, which we only have pictures of. A famous picture of a little kid sitting there with a measuring tape. You all have probably seen that. Anyway, that's a dovetail, which is harder to do. And And over time, construction methods become simpler and easier. That's just the trend. So you can't set your watch by the notching or the size of the lodge. You factor all those things together. And listen, I could be wrong about that date, but it's my gut feeling. Like I said at the beginning, I'm very skeptical of 18th century dates, and 9 times out of 10, I'm able to debunk them using various clues. So, and I hope I'm not wrong, but anyhow, I accept it if I am. So. Anything else? Yes?
Can you comment on the history and use of standing seam metal roofs?
Yeah, we know that they're in Sears and Roebuck catalog by 1891 at the latest. They're probably actually in there by like 88, I believe. We just don't see evidence of metal roofing around here, like I said before. I'm going to say the 1880s. At that time, the tin came in boxes. It was called box tin, in lengths of about 4 feet. And then they had to get up there and crimp it all together and solder it and all that kind of thing. And a little bit later on, you got the roll tin, where it's just one long sheet from the tip of the roof to the eave. But that's the evidence that I've seen. That you really just didn't get metal roofs to that time. The industry really wasn't that perfected, and people around here weren't necessarily quick to pick up on new technologies and materials.
So it appeared that there were some older houses that did have metal roofs on it. Was that retrofitted?
Oh yeah. I mean, once they got a chance to do something other than wood, and they could afford it, they did, because wood was not easy to deal with, and all those shakes and all that. And I tell people this all the time: a real crimp seam, standing seam metal roof is the best roof that's ever been invented. The stuff they use today is not as good. Those roofs will last 100 years, and that's just 10. If you use copper or something, probably last 200 years if you take good care of it. And because it's all hand crimped, each one of those standing seams is turned and then turned again. So they can't come apart, and there's no way that water can get in. So it's just an excellent, excellent roof. I mean, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anything else? Yes.
The very ornate wooden mantles, would those have been made locally, or was that a specialty item that would have been ordered from?
We think they're made in the valley. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of literature tracking them. And, in the 19th century, there's no paperwork for anything. And there's not enough people working on this stuff to follow trends. I mean, some of my colleagues and I talk about it a lot. Like, we don't put our heads together. We don't have time to collaborate on anything. And we don't connect the dots very often. Doing a talk like this actually helps me to connect the dots, because just going through all my different photos of Botetourt, and like I said about the timber framing, really drove that home for me. Like, there's just really not much timber framing here. It didn't really dawn on me before. So to answer your question, there are a few known mantle carvers, woodworkers in the valley that have been documented, but not many. And I don't know one name that I could give you or their location. But I would say that if they weren't made in Botetourt, they were made in a neighboring county. It didn't until later, till Victorian era, that everything's factory made. But soon after the Civil War, all these sash and blind factories are popping up. And that's where they start getting all their woodwork. It's all factory made. Yes, sir.
The local legend in Botetourt about a lot of the early carved mantles and moldings was that there were itinerant, primarily German craftsmen that came through and did that passed through. Would you comment on the likelihood of that, or?
I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. That just doesn't seem very plausible to me. And I mean, there's just so many houses that have them, and there's plenty of Germans here. Why must they be itinerant? And you could put a mantle on a wagon, and I don't know.
And
There's probably
$105 for a house, what would a mantle bring?
what's that?
They might be itinerant because they were homeless, at $105 for a house.
You know, I think there's a kernel of truth to everything like that. There's some truth to it, but I don't think it was a general rule in my opinion. Well, if you have any questions, come on. Thank you all very much for listening and indulging me. It's been a pleasure.
You guys, please stop by the gift shop on your way out. You can spend some money while you're here.
Mr. Mingo.
Yes, ma'am. Good.